The new Urban Spook episode is interesting, to say the least, but it still holds many of the same issues that I had with the series so far. But first, let's get into the history of Urban Spook here a little bit before jumping right into the new episode. See, Urban Spook follows a police department investigation as they are trying to find a serial killer who leaves paintings behind at each of the locations that the murders occurred in, with disturbing names correlating with how each person was killed. Generally, the people are found mutilated, to say the least, as the story would describe what happened to them in extreme detail, leaving no part out of it. The story became infamous, however, with this painting especially, which alludes to the essay of a child, which caused a wide amount of backlash to be brought against the series as people started looking at the flaws within it. The backlash it garnered mainly had to deal with the poor presentation and story that was within it, as many of the parts were just so over the top and graphic that it almost became comical, and it was a really bad presentation for the level of detail that the story was describing. For some reason, the extreme level of disturbing and extreme ideas within the series was too much and was not really dealt with well in the series as well. But if you really want a deeper explanation on why this is so bad, watch the video I made on the subject already. I go into a deeper exploration into the story and why it just doesn't work. It also became one of the huge proponents of the anti-shock horror wave, as many people disliked the series for its poor handling of sensitive and extremely shocking subjects, which I wholeheartedly agreed with on its original episodes. One of the first things that you learn as a writer is that you really don't touch super sensitive and dark subject matter unless you know how to do it properly, and the original Urban Spook episodes did not do. And I will get to later whether I think this new episode was able to do it or not, because I have a lot of thoughts on it. It's very complicated, more so than the other episodes so far. And the story itself was written in a way that was so edgy and over the top that you couldn't take it seriously, but it was discussing extremely realistic and disturbing subject matter in an exploitative way. And while opinions on Urban Spook's work may vary very much by person to person by what they're able to deal with, I found myself in the latter category, as I thought the presentation combined with the story made it one of the poorest analog horror series on the platform, as I didn't really find the story intriguing whatsoever, and while the paintings were creepy, they only had so much of an effect, which grew more and more tiring with each episode. And what really didn't help was the creator had a strong reaction to any criticism that was thrown his way, having meltdowns on Twitter and making edgy jokes that literally no one found funny. But I still tried to give this episode a chance, separating the art from the artist, you know. So let's see how that went. The episode begins like many of the other Urban Spook episodes, with the police investigating an abandoned paint factory where they find many more disturbing paintings, photos, and bodies from the serial killers. If you've ever seen an Urban Spook episode, you know how this goes. Many of the bodies, like the other episodes in the series, are mutilated beyond belief, with many of them being in pieces that almost feel like parts of a puzzle. While there, they find a wife and husband tied up human centipede style to a chain, the other half of the Beck children sewn together, a police officer who had been missing since meat, and many more bodies strewn around inside the factory. While exploring, they find a wall covered in writing, with one phrase particularly standing out, that of course being, "Once you've been to hell, you never come back." The police recognize this as one of the survivors of the previous attacks, Tina Rosenberg, had said the same phrase during an interview on her attack. Because of this, they send a police officer to do a wellness check on Tina, where when walking in, he comes upon this.
Hands right now! Do not move!
While freaking out over the screaming lady, the officer shoots one of the killers and then arrests the other, with the faceless man revealed to be Bill Collins, one of the police officers who had been missing while his whole family had been murdered, meaning that Bill Collins had probably murdered his family in order to go on a serial killing spree with this other girl. The other killer is revealed to be named Mona Lanius and also a girl. Mona then confesses to the officer that she has killed hundreds of people as the video turns to red. So my thoughts on this one may surprise you guys quite a bit, because I really hated the original Urban Spook episodes, but I think this one is okay. but it's just okay. Some parts of this definitely work much better than others, with the body cam section being the standout by far. I actually applaud the bullishness that UrbanSpook had with this episode, as instead of toning it down at all, he instead turns it up to 11, giving us one of the most graphic episodes in the series thus far. But this time we actually see everything that is happening, and all of it is shown in extreme detail. He does not fret away from showing this. I was honestly surprised that he didn't try to tone it down even a little, because it seems like besides that, they had actually listened to a lot of the criticism that had been given to them. But he really doesn't tone it down at all. It's almost to the same level as the Lighthouse and the Walls episode. Like, it's just that extreme again. But I think it's a much less offensive example because the presentation is that much better. But while I think the writing still sucks, the presentation is much better and much more interesting this time around. For example, the body cam scene is exceptional. Even with some of the movements being a little goofy, I can look past that with just how off-putting the characters are designed, along with the constant wailing of Tina as she bleeds out on the bed. It seems like Urban really leaned in on the praise for the phone call sequence from family with this sequence, as it really accentuates all the best aspects from the past sequence with the raw brutality and emotion on display as these characters experience the worst moments of their life. It is a brutal moment, and I won't hold back on that despite my past criticisms of the series. I give it the credit it deserves. Great job with that sequence. I think it would be a disdain for me as a critic to not give credit where credit is due. So separating the art from the artist, I think this sequence is excellent and makes the episode worthwhile watching for analog horror fans as a whole. But for the rest of the episode, on the other hand, I really cannot say the same. It's just more of the same stuff. The first 7 minutes are the exact same thing that Urban has been doing for the past 8 episodes, except the image is a video this time. It is still boring, over-the-top descriptions of the murder that we have seen before. I will repeat my criticism from the first UrbanSpook video. Once you do the same scare style over and over again, it's not scary anymore, it's just boring. This is why I'm personally not exactly a fan of shock horror, as it's mainly just like someone in your face being like, I'm fucked up, guys, aren't I? Aren't I, guys? Ooh, be scared of me. I'm so gross and shocking. While this episode really turns that up to 11, I think the first 2 episodes have desensitized me to the story too much, as I don't find any of the descriptions particularly unsettling anymore, which is why I think the police tape is even more effective, as we are actively seeing one of these excessive murders in action. This is something much more frightening and is a good change for this series as a whole, but the rest of the episode sticks in the same groove that the other episodes had been in. Cause oh my gosh, this writing is just as bad as the other episodes. The episode almost seems like Urban is just trying to get the series done with at this point, as the bodies seem to be a loose way of tying all the loose ends together as quickly as possible, with the factories having almost every answer that the police need to understand the case now. And it still has that emptiness and soullessness that has characterized the series thus far. We are just seeing horrible act after horrible act, but little reason is given why we should care for these characters at all. Which I understand that UrbanSpook is trying to show what real life is like. It's just a horrible serial killer doing horrible things, but it just doesn't make for an interesting story to watch. So this series still bothers me completely from a writing perspective, as there isn't much for me to care about while watching. Many of the characters that are killed I don't even remember the names of, with me coming to the realization about Collins by having to go back and rewatching the other episodes. There's just nothing for me to latch on to. Every character in here is completely forgettable. There is just no weight behind every scene, and the series just feels like we are going from one crime scene to another with little to no interesting information in between. And it's felt like that for a while now. Many episodes have been that super confusing, nothing really much going on, and nothing really being added to the story for a while now, but this episode is the same as that. So while the sequence in the home is unsettling and extremely well done and even interesting, I still just don't find the series that interesting as a whole. The story still reads like it was written by a 14-year-old, it's still that super edgy writing a la Jeff the Killer, it's just not really well written at all. And yes, before I hear about this 1,000 times, I know this is a shocking series about horrible things. It's not meant to be super eye-catching and all that. But while it's visually interesting, it's not completing the second aspect of filmmaking, which is to create an entertaining piece for the audience, which this is just not entertaining. This might be entertaining for like true crime fans, but for the analog horror medium, it doesn't really make sense. But in conclusion, the episode is still a confusing mess, but has one of the best sequences in the series thus far, with the last 3 minutes really being a standout with the series as good, if not better, than the phone sequence from Family. But with all the other issues within the episode, I still would have to give it a 4 out of 10. But for a reminder, this is a much better score than given the episodes before, with my original rating being a 1 out of 10. So if UrbanSpook could keep working towards making stuff like the phone call and the body cam footage, then they might just have something truly interesting on their hands. But we'll just have to wait and see. And with all that being said, let me know down in the comments your thoughts on the latest UrbanSpook episode. I'm almost 100% certain that this latest episode is going to be pretty divisive, as it's in sort of a strange limbo for me personally. But remember, if you like this video, to click that like button and subscribe if you aren't already. And I'll see you all next week.